Have you ever really stopped to think about one of the most incredible things you've ever done? You learned a language. Your first one. It's this amazing, universal human achievement, a super complex system of sounds and rules and meanings that you totally mastered before you could even tie your own shoes. So let's pull back the curtain and take a look at the actual blueprint your brain used to pull off this incredible feat. I mean, really think about it. No flashcards, right? No grammar drills, no homework. You were just there, and you learned. But here's the thing. It wasn't magic. It was a structured, pretty predictable process that every single one of us goes through. The real question is, how on earth did your brain do that?
Well, that journey from making little baby gurgles to mastering grammar, it follows this surprisingly similar blueprint for kids all over the world. Researchers have actually mapped out these developmental stages, and what they show is that we don't just learn language randomly. No, we build it piece by predictable piece.
Just take a look at how we learn to ask questions. It shows you just how systematic this whole thing is. We don't just jump straight to perfect grammar. Nope. We start simple, with just a rising tone on a single word. Cookie? Then we figure out that you can stick a question word at the front, even if the rest is a little messy, like, why that lady has blue hair. It's only much, much later that we master that tricky inversion of verbs and subjects. See? It's a clear path, not just random guessing.
And this gets to the absolute heart of it. This isn't just imitation. If kids were just mimicking us, their mistakes would sound like a confused adult. But they don't. Kids say things like, I goed to the store, or I see two mouses. They're definitely not hearing adults say that. What's happening is they figured out a rule, add ed for past tense, add s for plural, and they're applying it everywhere. They're actively building the language themselves.
And this is where it gets really cool. This is from the famous Wug Test. So, a researcher shows a kid a drawing of this weird little creature and says, this is a wug. Then they show a picture of two of them and ask, now there are two, and you know what? A kid as young as 4 will confidently say wugs. They've never ever heard the word wugs before in their life. This is solid proof that they've learned the rule for making plurals, not just memorized a long list of words.
So that internal grammar-building engine works like a charm for our first language. But what happens when we try to learn a second one as a teenager or an adult? Suddenly, all that effortless learning just seems to vanish. It feels like a completely different game, with a whole new rulebook and a brand new set of challenges.
And here's a little breakdown of why it feels so different. As an adult learner, your brain is fully mature. You've got what's called metalinguistic awareness. You can actually talk about grammar. You have this huge store of world knowledge that helps you guess what things mean. But here's the catch. You're also often super anxious about making mistakes. A little kid, they don't have that fancy cognitive toolkit, but they also have practically zero anxiety. They are not afraid to sound silly. And that changes everything.
So all of this leads to this huge, fundamental question. What is actually going on in our brains when we learn any language? For decades, linguists and psychologists have been locked in this core debate, and it really boils down to two major schools of thought.
Okay, so on one side, you've got the Innatist view. This idea argues that language is just way too complex to be learned from scratch just by listening. Instead, it suggests that we're literally born with a specific language module in our brain. Think of it like a kind of universal grammar. The language we hear as kids simply flicks the switch and activates this pre-installed software.
But then, on the other side of the debate, you have the usage-based perspective. This side says, hold on, we don't need a special language module at all. Our brains are incredible pattern detection machines. If you just give them enough input, enough real-world examples of language being used, our general brain power is more than enough to figure out the rules and build the whole system from the ground up.
Okay, so why should we care about this big academic debate? Well, because these two very different ideas lead to completely different ways of teaching a second language in the classroom. This is where the theory gets very, very real.
This debate basically splits language teaching into two main camps. On one side, you've got the get it right from the beginning approach. It's all about grammatical accuracy, doing drills, and avoiding errors. Then on the other side, you've got the let's talk philosophy, which is all about communication and just getting your meaning across, even if you make a few mistakes along the way.
So here's a classic example from what we'd call a structure-based classroom. The teacher isn't really asking because she wants to know what Bernard is doing. The whole point of the exchange is to get the student to produce a perfectly correct sentence in the present continuous tense. The conversation is just a tool for a grammar point.
And here is the total opposite. In this communicative classroom, the focus is on what the student is trying to say, on the meaning. Yeah, the student makes a mistake, string me, and the teacher corrects it, but she does it gently with what's called a recast, just by saying, oh, when it be stings me. The correction is there, but the conversation doesn't grind to a halt for a grammar lesson, it just keeps flowing.
So, which one is actually better? The grammar drill sergeant who's all about accuracy, or the free-flowing communicator who's all about meaning? Well, after decades of research, the verdict is in, and it points to a much more balanced and, frankly, more effective approach.
So here's the bottom line. Neither extreme really works perfectly on its own. Research shows us that students who are just immersed in a language often hit a wall with their accuracy. Their grammar fossilizes. And students who only ever do grammar drills, they can't actually hold a conversation. The most effective approach, it turns out, is a blend. It's about integrating that focus on grammar into meaningful, real communication. The goal is to help you notice your mistakes right at the moment they actually matter for getting your point across.
You know, this balanced view kind of suggests a new way of thinking about the goal itself. Maybe it's not about reaching some mythical finish line called fluency, where you've mastered every single rule. Maybe the real goal is just connection, the ongoing ability to share your ideas, to understand other people, and to be a part of a new world. So let's just end on this thought. What if fluency isn't the finish line at all? What if it's just the starting line for a lifetime of new conversations? If that's the real goal, how does that change the way we think about learning?